This is the Fantasy Roadshow.
Heyo, everybody. Welcome. I am not the Fantasy Trucker. I am Shane O'Mac, and this is another episode of the Fantasy Roadshow. And I am joined, as always, by Coles and Fantasy Trucker. You can find them at their Twitter handles right below. This episode is brought to you by Rule 1 Proteins. Hey, if you are looking to get back into the gym or just up your supplement game, they have the best proteins, the best supplements, the best vitamins, whatever that you have, they've got it. Just visit rule1proteins.com. Thanks for joining us. Hey, take a second if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe and like button down there below. We have a special guest tonight. We are joined by the host of Two Growls, One Roar podcast, Carolina Dad. How are we doing?
Hey, man, doing well. Appreciate y'all having me on the show today.
Yeah, congrats, Shane. I want to say round of applause for your wonderful intro, trying to be
Nicely
Truck.
done, Shane. Nicely done.
Yeah, so that was the first time anyone's done the intro besides Truck, Carolina Dad. So there is one thing I learned, Truck, that you and Carolina Dad have in common, and that is a past rap career.
Oh,
yeah.
You spit some bars, Carolina Dad?
Oh, back in the day, back in college.
Yeah,
that's part of the reason people don't know my real name halfway. But then we got Detective over here that was like dropping my real name, and I was like, "How did you find that, man? Like everybody's asking for it."
Detective Harbaugh. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So actually, this year, I don't know that we've teased this at all, but Truck, he also has a past rap career, and he is going to be doing some weekly recap raps for the Fantasy Roadshow, which I think is going to be a huge hit and an outstanding segment that we're very, very much looking forward to. So, hey, if the Panthers have a big game or something happens, maybe we can get a feature track and get
absolutely.
Come in and spit a couple bars.
Dust off the cobwebs.
I love it. I love it.
Let's just start. I want to get a little bit of background and intro with you. First, on a couple things, first a little bit, tell us a little bit how you kind of grew up, got into being Carolina Panthers fan, what that looked like for you over the years, how you've kind of gotten into it. Then maybe after that, a little bit, if kind of, we'll talk a little bit about if you're, into fantasy and kind of your involvement in that. But let's start with your background as how you became a Panthers fan.
Yeah, not a normal trajectory. So team founded a few years after I was born. So my dad already had a team, and his team was the Green Bay Packers. So for, I'd say, up through middle school, even into high school, I was a Green Bay Packers fan. Of course, you have the local market. So when the Panthers are on TV, you're following the team, you're following the Super Bowl. They weren't like my number one team. I latched on to Brett Favre. We went through a Brett Favre journey. So we went from Packers to Jets, then to Vikings. My father-in-law always makes fun of me. He's like, "You're doing a Panthers podcast, but when you started dating my daughter, my wife, you had Minnesota Vikings license plates." And he's like, what are you doing? So it was a wild journey. And I went to college. When I went to college is when Cam Newton was drafted. And of course, at that point, I was like, well, Favre's retired. I get to watch the Panthers every day on TV. And so that's really when it started. And of course, it helps that the Panthers had success, had a good run with Cam. And I think it didn't really pick up until probably the Super Bowl run. So we went to the NFC Championship game in Charlotte, me and my wife. She still hates me for it because it was like super cold for North Carolina. And then over the last year, I just got this itch. I was like, one, I want to start a podcast. And it's like, well, what do I want to talk about? And I was like, well, I'll talk about the Panthers. And I'm a big sports radio guy. So I listen to sports radio pretty much nonstop. I called into ESPN radio. I can't even remember which show it was. They let me through and we got to talk about the Panthers. And this was right before they traded Christian McCaffrey. And we talked through hey, they should do this, which now looking back, of course, no. but that was kind of the itch. And from there, I was like, okay, maybe I'll start something. I didn't know where to start. So I just started putting videos on my personal like Instagram. My wife's like, why are you posting Panthers content on your personal profile with family? I was like, I don't know. So then it just spun out and went down one day and was like, all right, I've got the equipment from the rap days. And I was like, it'll be easy for me to spin this up. And so sure enough, about a little over a year ago, decided to do the podcast. And it's been a journey, but slowly starting to see some of the benefits as far as like exposure and things like that. But yeah, that's really how I landed here.
I love that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's so funny. You and Truck for sure. How you ended up podcasting. It has the same kind of timeline. I mean, that's for a while. I've been trying to do something creative, and Truck and I've been kicking that around for a while. But he was producing music back in the day, and then we kind of just talked about it, and he's like, all in, like, let's go.
The way you edit music, it's very similar to editing a podcast. So I knew that going in. I'm like, we could do this, no problem. It's hands down, we can do this. So that's funny.
We would not have been here today without Truck's production skills and his background. His dad does some music production too, so he kind of grew up around it. But it's funny and cool to hear that side helped spark that, or just get you had the itch for the creative side, and that just kind of helped kickstart things. So that's awesome that we kind of are aligned in that way. But so Brett Favre, that's like football, that's where your football fandom started. Jumped over to the Vikings with him, and then Cam Newton coming to town was like, all right, this is my time to step in. Okay.
That was it.
Well, Cam Newton was probably the most dominant college football player, I mean, that I've seen, and probably, I don't know, Shane O'Mac, you date back a little bit further.
I'm a little bit more aware of certain past players. Yes.
Yeah. So what would you say is the like someone that you can compare with Cam Newton to my recent memory? It's
Well, if I want to dig way back, my Cowboys had a rough go with the Panthers. It was, I think, 95 or 96 with Kerry Collins upset Troy Aikman and the lead Cowboys in that game. I think that was either their first or second year in the league. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have no idea. I was focused on the Bulls winning championships at that point, and I hardly remember those years.
But they had the good run with Derek Anderson too, right? They had a couple of good years with Derek Anderson, quarterback there. That was
used to be pumped about him.
Far back. Yep.
Exactly.
Well, I love it. What so do you play fantasy football? What's your kind of relationship with fantasy, or are you just all in Panthers local radio?
I am. I do fantasy, so I'm not the best fantasy football player. We tried a few things. I've done a few things through like work, but they did customized scoring, and I was like, what is this? Which wasn't terrible, but then you look out at how fantasy's actually played, and it was just a totally different system. So that was my first experience with it. I did that like 3 or 4 years ago. I'm still in that league. It's not my favorite league, but we have that. So I do that every year. We tried the family league, but it was just tough to get the family to understand it. And they thought it was I'm going to draft everybody, and then I'm just going to let them sit. And then so it just turned into me and our oldest battling not each other every week, but it was between us two. And then last year I got an invite from guys I went to high school with, and they're like, hey, we have a real fantasy league. Do you want to join? There's money involved. And I was like, sure. I got the number 1 overall pick, and I think I finished 7th out of 10. So it was me and fantasy aren't great. I'd say I'm fairly new. I've played it, but not the best. Who
did you draft? Who did you draft at 101?
Oh my gosh, who I can't even tell you. See, that's how bad. Like
I'm surprised it wasn't Christian McCaffrey with your.
That's what I was gonna say.
To
him, you know.
No, I can't remember. I tell you what I do is I looked at whoever was projected. That's how much effort I put into it. It was like whoever they tell me is supposed to be the guy. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
it was a bad year. I think I won a few games, but yeah, didn't make the playoffs. Just kind of sitting back. And
well, I got great news for you.
Yeah,
this Fantasy Roadshow is here to guide you to a championship.
I need it, man.
We excel in those work leagues. You will dominate that work league, hanging with us, and eventually a championship in your friends league as well. So stick around for the season. We got some gems for you.
Yeah. I want to hear about the relationship with the local sports radio shows. So are you a frequent caller? What's kind of your relationship there? Is it all football? Is it just, give us your background with calling in radio?
Right now, primarily football, Carolina Panthers. That was kind of just luck. So I'm on X and I went to training camp. So we were very fortunate. Personally, our family, my wife's family lives in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which happens to be the place where Carolina Panthers held training camp for the last 20-some years. They're moving it to Charlotte this year, kind of bummed out. But what we did the last 2 years is stayed with them. And then I got to go to camp and spend the day with our oldest and go to probably 3, 4, 5 practices. And so I did it this past year, but while I was there, I didn't even realize I was following like the DJ, the local radio DJ. So he does like modern, like an alternative rock station, and then has an hour segment for ESPN radio where he just talks about local sports. And I tweeted something and he saw that I was at training camp and he was like, hey, do you want to come on and talk about the Panthers training camp outlook? So I said, sure. And had no idea what to expect. And we went on, he let me talk for like 15 minutes. And then kind of getting into the season, about every other week, he would have me on there talking Panthers. And so that's really where it stemmed from, which was cool because he also brings in a lot of bigger names than me. Like I'm clearly not a big name, but it was really nice because I don't know how much exposure I really got from it, but just to say like, hey, I get to go, ESPN Wilmington, talk sports. I was going to try to branch out. And I mean, North Carolina, we have NASCAR, really big NASCAR thing. We have Charlotte FC. So I spent like a month and was like, oh, I'm going to branch out and start talking about other stuff. And was like, I just personally can't do it. Like I could probably talk large college football, but not the way that I can about Panthers. So it's pretty much been a Panthers thing.
So I love that you had that, like you built that relationship with the local radio and kind of found your niche with the Panthers. One thing that we're hoping to build here with the Fantasy Roadshow in this, I think it's a great fit with you and the Carolina fan base, is to find guys that have their ear close to the ground. They know what the fan base voice is and kind of be a voice of the Panthers. And that's kind of, why we have you on here today. We're about to dive into the Panthers off season. Shane, you want to take us in?
Yeah. So I just want to really quick get your initial thoughts on, even before we talk about last year. I want to go back to a year ago and 2 or 3 weeks when the trade happened with the Bears. And I just kind of want to get your thoughts where back then going into last year's draft, your own personal opinion, were you sold on Bryce Young? Were you more, I know it's hindsight's easy to say now, but were you more CJ Stroud over Bryce Young at the time?
Great questions. I was very excited when we traded up. I remember at the time, my content creation had basically been a audio podcast. I think that might've been the first Instagram video that I created. I was like, oh my gosh, we traded up. We're going to have the number 1 overall pick. And so for the next 4 or 5 weeks, I spent time battling back between Bryce, CJ. And at the end of it, I was like, it's going to be Bryce Young. Like, that's who's going to be taken. That's who we ended up selecting. And to your point, like, hindsight's always 2020. I'm comfortable with the pick. I mean, I think we'll probably talk more about Bryce, later on in the segment, but I was not one of the ones that was like, it's CJ. I will say, like, CJ was right there as far as, like, you can go back and, not that y'all will, but I know some of the Panthers fans that may have been following, like, heard me talk every other week. I had CJ, then it was Bryce. And then it got crazy here in Carolina with fans following the pro days, because there was a clip that was leaked of Josh McCown. I don't know if y'all ever saw it. With him talking.
I was going to bring it up.
When you're here in Charlotte.
Yeah. Frank Reich was right there too.
Yes.
And
people ate that up.
So that, to me, like, I think they wanted CJ, and it was Tepper, who I have strong feelings about, stepped in and said, no, Bryce Young. So that's why. And then he even alluded to it a little bit during the year when they were on that kind of free fall down. He was like, yeah, I mean, it's the quote more than me, but basically alluded to, I wasn't calling the shots on Bryce over CJ. So
it was a wild year. So when Frank got fired, this is how crazy, like, Panthers sleuths are. Someone found Frank's daughter, and I don't know how old she's older, but found Frank's daughter on Twitter and saw where she liked this post of someone that said Frank's choice was CJ all along. It was like one of those, like, how did y'all find this? And they liked it. Mm-hmm. But there was also a moment in between. It's harder because everything blends together. But at some point when Tepper has brought up, like, his veto power in pressers, which makes you just, like, to your point, it's like everyone here is like, we knew that, like, that was his choice, and it felt like CJ would have been Frank's choice. Yeah, just didn't work out, and kind of everything imploded. And this is where we are.
At some point, I didn't think it was gonna be this quickly into the podcast, but I was gonna start shitting on Tepper. So might as well be now. I think he's a horrible owner. Like, he's just your classic, like, billionaire that thinks they're smarter than everyone else, and like, this is not his lane. And he should hire guys that he trusts and give them all the resources, but, like, take a step back. And if they say we're drafting CJ Stroud, then fucking draft CJ Stroud, So that's my thoughts on him. That's going to be something that you're going to have a lot of, it's not going to go away, right? You're going to, that pain is, you're going to feel that at many different times throughout his reign as the owner. So that's just, you got to set your expectations there as a Panthers fan, I feel, and just hope that he learns from his mistakes over time, which, he's made all that money. So hopefully he's smart enough to learn from mistakes. It's not a mistake if you learn from it. So, but I had to just vent about Tepper because I think he's absolute dog shit. It would be hard for me to be a Carolina Panthers fan. That being said,
tough, man.
Yeah, I break loyalty pretty quickly when something like that happens. So that's just me personally. But I had a shit on Tepper. It was coming.
Nah, it's all deserved. My, like, father-in-law too, because, like, he follows me and everything we do. He's always he's like, why are you following why the Carolina Panthers? Pick someone else. He wants me to just, like, it's like, pick a better team, man.
Was he a Panthers fan?
Not really. Like, he's from South Carolina. I'd say he's not a big NFL guy. He loves college football. Big South Carolina fan, and just that's his thing. He will follow the Panthers because of me, but it's not like his thing. But he just wants
a more entertaining team to follow because he's like, I'm going to watch all your content regardless.
He's like, I'll
do this with a good team. So you're North Carolina, he's South Carolina in terms of fandom. I see the Tar Heel above your head.
Yeah. We had lots of fun. We do a family unrelated, but we do a straight up pick 'em 9-game college football thing every. And it's just straight up, no spread, because it's all fans. It's like wife, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, my mother-in-law, like, everyone's in it, which is fun because in that one I didn't finish well either. think I was like middle of the pack.
But there's 9
Like,
games that you get to pay attention to, watch, have a little skin in the
Yep.
game, have fun with family. Well, we're gonna have to get into Drake Maye as well at some point. But Shane, why don't you?
So let's get into last year. What coaching was the big change last year? So a couple of things. What was the kind of local reaction firing Frank Reich after just 11 games? I'm assuming maybe was it more pro Frank Reich when that happened last year, and wanting to give him more time than just 11 games?
Yeah, I think you kind of got mixed reactions. So the fan base, I think it's just a lot of things boiled over with multiple losing seasons, the mismanagement, like even before Frank with Matt Rule, and just that whole thing that didn't work out. I think Frank unfortunately came in and had higher expectations because Steve Wilkes did so well in his interim role. So when Frank comes in, there's all this press around all-star coaching staff, which they had some really good names on the staff. All-star staff, they've got hundreds of years of experience. Like Panthers were putting out all this. We get into the season, people start to get a little worried with the offense, like in the preseason, then we're told like it's going to be okay. And then things just keep spiraling, and you could see whatever was happening. I mean, Joe Person, I don't know if y'all know like the local reporters, but Joe Person of The Athletic puts out this like Hunger Games article. I don't remember what week it was, but it was before Frank was fired. But it just like opened the door to everything that was happening behind the scenes with this coach going behind, Frank's back to talk to Tepper. You've got Scott Fitter, the GM, trying to give advice on how Bryce Young should, move up in the pocket or his footwork. So you have all those things spiraling, and then you think about the personnel, and like the personnel that we were sold coming into the season was really good. Adam Thielen, all the additions, Miles Sanders, and you get in and things just crumble. And so I think people expected him to be fired. I think really the thing that set it off with fans after the fact, I think when we saw Tepper throwing water, that kind of put everyone like, oh, wow, maybe this really wasn't on Frank. Like, sure, he probably had a hand in some of it being terrible, but he was just in a bad situation. Like, he was a great person. So I think that was kind of the what people felt, but then it was like, okay, now what? Because this is another year. You fired the coach, and we're going to do another reset. And then behind it, and not that it directly aligns, but you have Tepper, who owns Charlotte FC, and he fired that coach as well. And so after they made the playoffs, and so fans are just sitting here like, what is going on? Like, what is happening in the front office? And at that point, I didn't really know what to expect.
It goes back to a classic billionaire cannot be the one that says, I am wrong, I made the wrong decision, and needs to point the finger. And that relationship had already bridged with Reich was like, this is not on, like, he's not going to take responsibility for that. He tried to do, whatever the best job that he could with someone breathing down his neck, trying to micromanage him and tell him how to, coach, when no one wants to be in that situation. Right. And then you have Tepper, just things are not working out. This is a new team. I have to point the finger somewhere. So, it was a split that was mutual, because he's like, I don't want to be in this situation anyways. Right. So, that's just the reality of it. I'm also like a believer in Bryce Young. I like Bryce Young. I think he's still going to be a good quarterback. I know a lot of the fantasy world is pretty sour on Bryce and kind of don't think that way. I would say I'm on the more optimistic and think he's a better quarterback than a lot of the fantasy space. And it's just, he hasn't had a fair shake yet. Right. He hasn't had a wide receiver. Miles Sanders, I've said it on the podcast since we started, like, he's going to have a RB1 opportunity in Carolina, but I just don't think he's that good. And that's, they paid him to be that guy, and he just wasn't. Right. So, they haven't found the pieces to get in there yet. And that could take time. Right. So that
Exactly.
that kind of goes along with Bryce Young's maturation process in my mind.
So you had a good year this year for head coaching candidates. What was the feel down there with the hiring of Dave Canales? You had some big names. You had obviously the big names like Belichick and Vrabel. You had some of the young up and coming coordinators like Canales. You had Slocum. Ben Johnson pulled his name out, but was it seen as a good hire in the area by most folks?
I think it was a surprising hire initially, and that's only because our entire fan base was convinced that we were going to pay Ben Johnson millions of dollars to come to Carolina. I mean, whether he was truly going to be in the running or not, I don't know. But I think fans really wanted that big name. So the Johnson, the Slowick, Vrabel when he became available, and it just didn't happen. I think we were kind of shying away from Belichick just because it was like, I don't really know if we want him.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny. I put as all this was happening, I went out and did I think we interviewed 11 or 12 coaches, and I put videos together for each one. The Dave Canales interview was the least viewed. Nobody cared about it. And I even personally said, oh yeah, maybe if we bring on a bigger name, there's some way that we would convince him to, I don't know, you got contracts, but if there was a way to get him over as a coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
So those the words came out of my mouth. And then sure enough, it's like, oh, this is your guy. I will say, now that things have settled, I feel like he's the guy for the team. Now, that's not to say we're going to go out and win a ton of games next year, but it's different, but it's only going to be different, which we've kind of talked about, if Tepper is truly out of this thing. And if he really lets Dave do this the way that he wants to do it. So I'm kind of sold now, at least fans are, because I think at least what we're trying to see is
playoffs.
He developed.
Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs.
I love it.
I just hope we can win a game.
Love it. Not here. But we look at the development of Geno Smith, what he did with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
And I think those are the things that we're trying to hang our hat on. Try not to get too caught up in the rushing attack that Tampa had last year, which wasn't great. So I think that's where we are. But we're getting kind of honest answers from him, starting to see him more, as he talks more to the press and we hear more from him. I think fans are coming around. And although it wasn't like a home run, or at least perceived as a home run for a lot of folks, at least Panthers fans are content for the most part.
And I think what was surprising for me is that, he retained, I think it was 12 or 13 assistants from the previous coaching staff, which you don't see very often.
You don't. So there was a lot of talk, Ejiro Evero. So the whole defensive side is back, which was surprising. There was a lot of conversations. One, Ejiro Evero interviewed for the head coaching position here. That was his second time. So before last year, when Reich was interviewing, he was the one that interviewed for head coach. He ends up being coordinator, goes back through it again. Panthers block him from, interviewing elsewhere for other coordinator positions, and then pick someone else over him. So for me, it feels like I hope he wants to be here. That's kind of our talk, is not that he would go out and just tank, but that's got to be a little frustrating is for any person to interview somewhere, get passed over, and then you're stuck and you can't actually move, because you're tied into where you are. But we're hopeful on that side. I know we may talk a little bit about it, but the one thing we were hanging our hats on is you bring back the defensive staff. We've already got the defense installed, and maybe you have the Burns or the Luvu, and sure enough, we're just going to reset half of our positions on that side of the ball. So it's interesting times.
Well, let's hop into Fantasy Show. Let's hop into the offensive side of things with the Panthers. And I think probably the biggest thing to talk about in this offseason was the trade of Diontae Johnson. He got the trade for the cornerback, Diontae Jackson. Last year of his contract, so one thing, $16 million, I think, cap hit on the team. Do you think that they will give him an extension before this season starts? Is that something you'd want to see, first of all?
It's a good question. I will say, like regarding the trade, I think it was an excellent trade for us. So before Diontae Jackson, the cornerback, was dealt, the report came out that he was going to be either cut or traded. And this was like 3 days before that, like roster bonus, March 16th. So the fact we got a receiver, a playmaking receiver in exchange for a guy that wasn't going to be here was really good in my thought for what Dan Morgan did. As far as extension, I think that's a really good question. It feels like a prove it year, but you do wonder, like he is a really good receiver, or at least should be a great asset for Bryce Young. Do you try to lock him up a little bit earlier? Maybe if he excels this year, there's no telling what the price tag is going to be. I'm all for getting Bryce as many weapons as possible and making sure that they're here in the long term. So I'd probably be in favor of it if we could work something out, a 2-3 year extension. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't really heard a lot of talk about what that'll look like just yet.
I like Diontae there. I think Thielen had like 137 targets last year, so I think his floor is probably 140. He's young. He's had that wide receiver one type target share in the past, and like finally someone that can make plays get open for Bryce Young. Like Thielen's just, I mean, we can all agree, like you don't want Thielen as your wide receiver one.
Right.
Just from age, from route tree, from explosive ability. Like he's a great, sure-handed slot. But that should not be your top receiving weapon. So I think Diontae is going to have a good season there. I think it gives Bryce someone to make some exciting plays with while Mingo is still kind of learning the game. And to me, Mingo is a guy that will eventually be a solid, like, I want to say Deebo Samuel light, maybe not that dynamic in ways to get him the ball, but like that physical and catching balls like in the middle and through the middle and just exploding, that Deebo Samuel quality. That's what I see Mingo eventually working to when he gets a little bit more comfortable and a little more settled into the offense and the NFL, the speed of the NFL.
Yep. He had pretty decent rookie year. He missed a little, like 1 or 2 games, but I agree with you. I think love to see what he's going to do in year 2. I know a lot of Panther fans compare him with some of the other rookies, and they're like, well, he didn't have as much production. But I'm like, let's just give it another year. Let's see how this thing's going to pan out. Speaking of the Deebo, this is just kind of funny. So last year during this time, we have Laviska Shenault, and and even there were moments where Frank mentioned that we thought Laviska was going to be our Deebo Samuel, and that thing just did not pan out at all. It was not great.
Yeah, in terms of like individual player development, you could throw everything out the window from the Panthers last season, especially the young guys. Like the only thing that I wouldn't expect to bounce back in a big way is Miles Sanders. Like I just think like from talent, he's just not that guy unless the offense becomes as good as the Eagles where he doesn't have to be that big of a focal point, right? Like that's why he had so much success there, is because he was the 4th maybe option in terms of playmaker. So I wouldn't be worried about Bryce. I wouldn't be worried about Mingo. You can kind of take last season and throw it away and just hope they're in a more stable, more of a better environment to develop and see what they actually got.
Yep. I agree.
So what do you
Go
think,
ahead,
real quick, what do you think about this rushing attack with Chuba Hubbard? Like, what's your gauge on where Miles Sanders is going to fit in this offense this season? Is Chuba going to get the full load, kind of like what we saw towards the end of the year last year, which he had some pretty good games. I like what I saw from Chuba. I think he's a good running back. And I had high hopes for Miles Sanders myself. I fell flat on my face with that one. But, what's your gauge on Chuba and Miles and the direction this running attack is going to be going this year?
Yeah, so what we've heard from Canales is that Chuba is running back one officially, where things stand today. I think going into camp, it'll be a chance for Miles to try and prove that there's still something there. He'll be on the roster. Like I don't see him getting cut only because of just how much he's owed. I think next year maybe that's when they look at, letting him go a little bit earlier, like they did with like Hurst and Bozeman and Von Bell. But yeah, it seems that Chuba's the guy, and I think Panthers fans are okay with it because we wanted that to happen. Oh, I won't say coming into the season we wanted it. As things progressed and we saw Chuba Hubbard and what he was doing, and hard to know if it was 100% on the scheme or if Miles was just that different or worse than Chuba. But I think we were pleased with Chuba being, the number one running back. But I mean, I personally too am always a fan of upgrading whenever possible. We may talk a little bit about draft, but I'd love to have the Panthers look in the draft. Like if there is a best player available, probably won't make a lot of sense this year, but yeah, unless there's just something that drastically changes, I don't see Miles really developing any more than what he has.
Steroids.
Just amp off.
So basically, you want to see them draft a running back this year?
I do. Like I'm in favor now. We do have Raheem Blackshear. He's like our third running back, but he's also a kick returner. So like in reality, the room is set. So it's hard to imagine us drafting, knowing that we're probably only going to keep three on the roster. So it's like maybe there's an undrafted guy, but I don't know. I've seen a few mocks, or I've done a few mocks where I go after a running back, and then Panthers fans are like, "Why are you doing that?" It's like, well, I wanted a playmaker for Bryce.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe the running game gets helped out this year. I mean, the Panthers, they sunk a lot of money into the offensive linemen this free agency. They signed Robert Hunt to, I think it was 5 years, $100 million. Damian Lewis for 4 for like $54 million. Was that signings that had to be made in this free agency period?
Definitely. So Hunt and Lewis really securing the interior offensive line. One for Bryce Young, giving him hopefully a pocket to step up into and throw. Offensive line was just terrible last year. We saw so many injuries on the interior between left guard and right guard, the rotation that was in there. I mean, we were down to like second string, third string, some undrafted guys that were even getting in there. But it's funny, a year ago, we were very happy as a fan base because the offensive line that was intact then was under contract for 2 years. And they had just come off, the run with Steve Wilkes, looking like a really good offensive line. And we're like, oh, well, we've got the offensive line set for the next 2 years. And then now it's just a total rebuild, complete reset. But I think it had to happen. There's people in the Panthers fan base, as far as like looking at it, that still question Ike Ekwonu at left tackle. He was, one of the top picks we had a few years ago. People don't know if it was a scheme thing again for him. Some people want him moved inside, which is likely not to happen now. But you do have some good things happening now with like Brady Christensen available technically as like a second string guy. We signed a swing tackle from Green Bay. So you have some good things happening there. And then at least today, it sounds like the plan is to move Austin Corbett over to center, which it'll be his first time playing center. So I'm kind of anxious to see if we decide to draft a center as well as moving Austin over. But yeah, I think it had to happen. Contract wise, like those are some big contracts, and we've seen, big contracts work out in some cases and then not work out. And it could look like a terrible move in 2 or 3 years, but I think at least for this year, it had to happen.
If it improves the line, you have to do that right now. Where you're at in the Carolina rebuild, right? Like you just need that sure line to protect Bryce. He's a smaller guy, right? The way that he makes plays a lot of time is when he gets creative and kind of things break down and he just sees the field really well. So having that line, being able to get him that extra time and let the receivers get downfield and things kind of open up for him, that's where he's going to have success. So like if you want if you want to have not traded up to that 101 and given away all those assets go to waste, then you got to pay the line, make sure you at least have that set, win the game up front, and then go from there, So I don't hate that.
Yeah. And then is it's not going to be probably a spot fantasy owner's target. The Panthers tight end, but is Trimble is he the tight end one right now as of now?
Yes. Yep. So we had that coming out too. So in the league meetings that are happening now, we've had some of our reporters bring that up over. One, they brought it up to Dan Morgan, our GM, yesterday. They asked Dave Canales about it today, and both of them are saying, yeah, Tommy Trimble is tight end one. I think he can be, but I don't know if that he's 1,000-yard receiving or can hit 1,000 receiving yards.
Mm-hmm.
He may be like a 500-yard guy if he gets more targets. He has the ability, but we've seen him, we've seen Ian Thomas and Sullivan now here. And it's like, I personally too, when we talk about draft, I'd love to get a pass catching tight end. I don't know where it stacks with like internal priorities, but I would love an upgrade at that position because Ian Thomas is really just a blocking tight end. So it really is Tommy Trimble. And I don't know that I'd have many people going out and drafting him as your tight end on any fantasy leagues.
I'll tell you. So, yeah, I was actually going to make a comment that I will for sure be targeting. Truck and I do a lot of these best ball drafts where you just, draft a full 20-person lineup and then it's optimized throughout the week. So, like last year, we targeted a lot of Stroud and the Texans and Bryce and the Panthers, knowing that their value is pretty low. And there could be some value there, if one of them takes off. Obviously, we had a ton of value with our Texans picks, not so much the Panthers. But I'll run it back this year with the Panthers. And Diontae is a guy that's getting drafted right now at like wide receiver 36. He's going to only drop once these rookies get drafted, and they'll be slotted ahead of him. So he's going to be, wide receiver 40. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 on a team where I expect Bryce, who the fantasy world looks at as he's going to be pretty far down there and looks at him as a poor quarterback. I think there's a ton of value in wide receiver 1, stack him with Bryce and stack him with Trimble, because Trimble is athletic. Like he can, like you said, he's not going to be 1,000-yard catcher, but he has made big plays and he is a big playmaker. It's just like, will he have that volume? Probably not. That being said, like on a 1, 2, 3, 4 off game, will he have a touchdown or two? That can definitely happen. So he's going to be a huge value in best ball.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's not forget, like Adam Thielen, guys, right? I think you guys remember this, Truck and Coles. Like for the first 5-6 weeks, he was wide receiver 2.
Yeah, he was one of the best wide receivers through the first quarter of the league or the season last year. Mm-hmm. He it was so deceiving because like he looked so good, and then people were selling him off, selling him high, and that was the right thing to do because he just wasn't able to keep that momentum going the whole season. But yeah, that was impressive.
Yeah.
Well, that was funny because Truck, we got a lot of Chark. Like we planted our flag. We got a little bit of Thielen. We got a lot of Chark. Like we were trying to find where to stack him, and we just didn't have enough Thielen. And Truck was like texting me like, "Damn it, I knew it, Thielen." Like,
well, I was saying Thielen's name early on, and then you just made a lot of sense. We were talking about. We're like, dude, this guy's old. Brand new quarterback. What let's go with Chark. But that was
my bad.
Hindsight.
Didn't last all season, but definitely was powerful there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like 10.
Well, let's look at the draft now. We teased it a little bit. The good thing is you're picking high in the second round. The bad thing is there's no first round. So looking at those first couple picks, which I think is 33 and 65, I think, where do you want to see them go position-wise with those first 2 picks?
It's a good question. I'm a little bit hopeful that a quarterback falls and we have a desperate team that wants to move up to pick 33 and we maybe recoup a few more picks. Like that's my ideal plan. I don't know how realistic it is, but looking at those picks, so we have 33 from where we traded Brian Burns. We got 39 from the Giants
30.
and then 65. So it's not, you have 2 in the top 40. That's the only thing. Like, we gave the Bears the world. That's all I can say there.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, man.
That was great.
I don't know. We'll
That was
never
great.
live that down. I even went on the other day and said, I don't even care if the Panthers win a Super Bowl with Bryce. Like, it's still never going to balance. Like, this is wild. But for us, I think just looking at the team, I feel good about the offensive line now, better. Some may make a case to draft a center, but I don't think you have to do that, initially in those first, 3 picks that we have. Feel good about interior defensive line. I think for us, we still have to address the edge position. So we brought in DJ Wonham, Vikings, trying to maybe convince Clowney. Don't know if that'll happen. We brought in a guy from Jacksonville that was a former first-round pick, but just hasn't panned out.
Mhm.
I still think we need someone else, an edge that can, impact the game. A little bit earlier, we drafted a DJ Johnson last year. Didn't really work out. So I'd say edge seems to be a priority. Wide receiver, even though we have what we have, I don't think you can go wrong looking at a Leggett, a Troy Franklin, a Ladd McConkey, if these guys are there. And then I think linebacker, we're big in, state of North Carolina. Peyton Wilson, he's getting a lot of looks or comparisons to Luke Kuechly, not specifically, but Luke's high on him, and that's all you need our fan base to hear is that
Yeah,
Luke likes
as
him.
you should. As you should.
Yep. So I think that's kind of the move. I mean, you could possibly look at a cornerback. I think also our fingers are crossed that Powers Johnson just falls to us. That I'm that I don't see him getting out of the first round. So yeah, it's going to be tough. I do think there's value in if we wanted to wait to the 3rd round because it's the first pick in the 3rd round, maybe which Malachi Corley's stock's going way up. The class is deep, but you may be able to hold off. But that's what the thing I've seen with doing the mocks is you have to pick your where do you want to improve now, because the further down you go, you may hit and you get a guy that develops really well, but you also may get a bust. And so it's where do you want to address and what do you want to address now, and go from there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think if I was the GM of the Panthers, I would almost go obviously best player available. I just don't know what their team needs are enough, but I would go best player available. And then if I needed a tiebreaker, it would just be what is the lowest risk position? Because you can't really swing and miss at these 2nd, 3rd rounders, right? Giving up that first rounder, you just you're rebuilding a team. You need to just you need to hit on these early draft picks, especially, and then can kind of take more dart throws later on in the draft. But that's what I would do if I was sitting in that situation. Yeah, one other not about this is not going to be Panthers draft, but this is going to be the draft. You're a Tar Heel fan. I want to hear about Drake Maye. I don't know that I would take him at 2. I actually think the Commanders. I think they're going to go. And it's not because I have this LSU headband on, but I think Jaden Daniels is going too. I think the Marcus Mariota coming in, that signing was kind of an indication of that. He's been behind some mobile quarterbacks, and he can just play in that type of a system. Where do you think Drake Maye? I'm sure you think he's QB2 in the draft. Just let me hear your experience. You've watched more of his film than me, so
Yeah, no, I'm a homer. I definitely he's up there. I'd probably say top 2, top 3. But then to the flip side, I get outside looking in. If you look at a Mitch Trubisky and I don't know. I mean, you got do I really want to go down there?
Let's not bring his name up.
There's going to be an immediate. There's going to be immediate bias from Truck and I, having seen how big of a mess that was. It's all right, white quarterback from North Carolina going 102. No, thanks, we're out. But he does seem to be have more of the built-in tools that you look for in a quarterback, the height, just the arm, which Mitch and more tape, right? He's
got a lot more tape.
There's a lot more tape. But yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say besides he has tools. I just haven't watched him enough. So like, what do you think? Where do you think he goes? And not just where do you think he is, but where do you think he goes at this point? I'm sure you're keeping an eye on his landing spot.
I think to your point, I've seen him dropping a little bit, not a ton. I think the Giants, have seen in the latest, and in some mocks, I don't know how realistic that is. New England, I've seen that come up a few times. Yeah, it's hard to say. I will be just, following him as he goes, just like, following Sam Howell. Yeah. Sam had he had a great season, but, a little bit. And
he led Truck loves bringing up this stat. He led the league in passing yards for
at a certain point of the season. It was like week 13 or 14, and he was leading the NFL in passing yards. When I saw that, it blew my mind. I was like, "Oh my God, this kid is just slinging it."
Yeah, I think a lot of that was Coach B, honestly. But he's going to have an opportunity with the Seahawks now. With all of the weapons that you could ever ask for. Geno Smith, who is just asking to get clipped by a young quarterback and take over QB1. So, like, he has an opportunity sitting in front of him. If he is a starting quarterback in the NFL, we're going to find out this year. And he can be a very good one because he's got maybe the best weapons in the league or close to it in Metcalf, JSN, Lockett, Ken Walker, Charbonnet. So like, he's going to have an opportunity. That's exciting, being a Tar Heel Howell fan. For sure.
Shane, did you notice how this is the first time he didn't call him Charbonneau?
That is, yes.
Is it because a disappointing rookie season? Now he's no longer Charbonneau, he's Charbonnet.
So, I don't even care about him.
Sorry, what were we saying?
I was going to say, unrelated to the Panthers, I think talking about North Carolina.
Yeah,
I think we're just ticked off at the past 2 years and just wasting Drake Maye and wasting Sam Howell. It's tough, man, because I felt like for us to have any chance to be anything relevant in college football, it was now. And anyways, it's going to be a bad few years. I might have to take that thing down once the season starts.
Nah, hoops. You got hoops.
Yeah. You have hoops. Yep. We'll hang our head on that.
Yeah.
But I do have to ask you, it's been bugging me the whole show. Like, I need to know, what is the significance of the Raiders helmet there in the background?
Oh, yeah. It's actually my high school football helmet. So it's, it does look like Raiders. Yeah. You're probably, wait, which team? That's a good question. Nobody's asked, but it is, it's actually Cougars, but we mimicked the Raiders. So good question.
So what do we play in high school? What position? What?
Running back, and then strong safety, which I'm a shorter guy. I ended up tearing my ACL senior year, and so I went to small Division III school, played football there, and ended up out here on the coast. Followed my wife to UNC Wilmington.
Nice. I got a question for you. Coles and I took a trip out to Raleigh, North Carolina.
Charlotte.
A year ago. Was it? I thought we went to Raleigh.
Nope.
I could have sworn we went to Raleigh.
I know for a fact we didn't.
I delivered because I was the truck driver. I delivered.
I promise you that we didn't.
Carolina.
It was not the trip we went on. I know we went to Charlotte.
Okay, maybe
I've never been to Raleigh.
I went to Raleigh without you then because
you
I remember asking.
I've never been to Raleigh.
So, what is your favorite Carolina barbecue? We tried a couple barbecue joints out there. It was really, really good, but I'm just curious, what's your gauge on? I have to ask about food. I'm a big foodie. So, what's
believe it or not, I'm not a big vinegar-based barbecue man. I'll eat it. I actually like the Texas style more brisket than Which I know folks in North Carolina, because I've lived here my whole life, are probably going to be so ticked off. But that's just me. I'm more of a I don't like the vinegar base. I like more of the ketchup base, sauce. And so, but that's not to say like you put that barbecue in front of me, I'm going to devour it, and that like we grow up on it. So
yeah, fair enough.
What's the late night fast food? Cookout.
Cookout.
What's the rundown on Cookout?
Oh my God. It's really good. It's too much. I mean, the menu, you get burgers, you get fries, hush puppies, barbecue,
Quesadillas.
milkshakes.
Just
So I
anything and
had,
everything.
yeah, I went to it's a big variety menu. So I went to Vegas for work a few weeks ago and had In-N-Out. And I always heard that they were kind of similar, but I didn't realize In-N-Out's menu was like just basic. But Cookout has so much. People love it. That and Bojangles.
Yeah.
North Carolina.
Chuck, we got to go back for Cookout for sure.
Yeah, I'm mad. We almost stopped a couple times because there's a couple of them right off the highway.
Yeah,
I
we
saw the
should've.
They're
signs
good.
and we
Huge.
did not stop. But
Huge L on our part.
yeah, that was a big one. I mean, we went to Skyline in Cincinnati. We should have gone to.
Oh, nice.
We should have gone to the Cookout for sure.
Let's talk about the division. Where do you guys see, what's best case scenario this year? Where do you see yourself fall in the division? And just kind of, what is that next couple years trying to fight back to the top look like?
Yeah. I say I'm not going to get burned this year. Last year was like, oh, we're going to come out and win 10 games. Oh my God. That was terrible. I've been watching the over under win total seem like 4.5, 5.5. I think that's reasonable. I know that Canales is coming out and saying every coach is going to say they're ready to win now. Yeah. I think realistically, if we could get to 5 or 6 wins in my book, I'm like, that's an improvement. I want to see us win a few more games, be competitive, and see Bryce Young develop and know that he is the guy, because we've seen other quarterbacks, whether it's the Mac Jones, you see Fields, not to say they're exactly the same, but you see quarterbacks getting moved earlier. And so I'm like, I've been saying that, I am a fan of Bryce Young, but at the same time, his clock is starting. He's got a reinforced offensive line, starting to get a few more weapons. I'm not saying he has to do it this year, but I think these next 2 years are critical for him, at least in Carolina, because otherwise you may be looking at do we need to move on? So, but I'd say that's it. Division wise, it feels like Kirk Cousins coming over to Atlanta with all the weapons they have. They feel like the favorite to me out of the gate. I think Tampa with Baker, you don't have Canales there calling the offense, but they still have Mike Evans and a ton of other weapons. So I think Tampa would still be pretty close. And then I think New Orleans, if they can figure out whatever is going on with Derek Carr, maybe I'd have them kind of third. I'd put us at the bottom right now. We have no reason to be considered near the top until we can actually go out and start winning some games. So
yeah, but good thing is, with Kirk Cousins, he has limited time. Derek Carr, it's got to be limited time by now.
Yep.
You guys, if you make the right moves here in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, this division seems like it's going to open wide up for you guys as soon as Kirk Cousins is out of Atlanta, because I think he's going to run the show over there. But yeah, man, the future is bright if you make the right moves here in the next year or two.
Yep.
10.5. Atlanta Falcons 10.5 is that. I saw that and eyes got wide. I can't believe. It makes sense. I would probably say they're going to win over 10 games just because their division. They got 6 games, 2 against you, 2 against the Saints. I'm going to just say 4 wins right there, and then maybe you split against the Bucks. You're 5-1 in the division. I don't know what the rest of their schedule looks like, but that's, if you can get 5 wins in your division, that's pretty healthy there. Saints were at 8.5, 7.5, 7.5. So that seems about right. And then Bucks, I just saw 8.5. So they have it as
Panthers are at what, 6.5?
4.5.
4.5.
4.5. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You don't have to chuckle when you say it. Patriots are 4.5. Broncos are 5.5.
Yeah.
So it's not. Listen, we can't laugh as Bears fans.
Hey, I'm laughing right now. We'll see what happens. We'll see
as just back-to-back years with the number 1 overall pick. But anyways, yeah. So I I think I agree with Truck. Like Baker, to me, he's a good fit right now. When he's not throwing the ball to Mike Evans, I think that changes things. Mike Evans has made every quarterback that's ever played with him look good. Derek Carr, Saints need to figure out a quarterback very soon. If Bryce Young is the guy and ends up a franchise quarterback, then the Panthers will be in a good spot if Tepper doesn't get in his own way. That to me, like, I don't even care about wins. I'm not looking at it. I'm expecting it to be, get a good draft pick next year, but it's more about the production and the development of Bryce Young, like, end of story,
Yep.
A lot of those weapons that they'll build around him will be different, and you just got to start there and focus on him, his development, and let everything else fall into place.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Okay, well, appreciate you, Carolina Dad, coming on. Like Cole said, like, we'd love to have you as our Panthers guy throughout the year. If anything breaks, big happenings, have you come on during the season to talk about any big matchups. If you're willing to do that, we'd love to have you as our Panthers person next year.
Be great.
Everybody follow him at 2 Growls, 1 Roar. That is the number 2 Growls and then the number 1 Roar. All of his socials are there at 2 Growls, 1 Roar. Coles, before we sign off, is there anything you'd like to interrupt with?
Yeah, always.
Okay, always.
We would love to have you on as our Panthers guy and a potential feature on a track or two with the weekly rap recap. Truck's going to be
got to figure that out. Yes,
Truck's going to be figuring out some beats for us. If you come up with a beat and you're like, this would go hard on a fantasy on an NFL recap, definitely. We're going to stay in touch here throughout the off season. I'm sure we'll have you on again before the season. Maybe we'll even do like a little bit of fantasy tutoring before the draft. You can come on and do a mock draft with us, and we can kind of just break down the fantasy, try to get you get you in a fantasy, seeing the game through a fantasy lens before your drafts this season. And it could be kind of like, I don't know, fun and educational for the listeners, but also get you ready for the draft. So those are just some ideas that I have firing in my ADD brain before we head out. Yeah.
Could probably bring y'all over too, have you talk on the show that I do and give fans some insight. It'd be great.
Yeah, would love that. That would be outstanding. And if Truck ever finds his way to Carolina, we'll maybe do a live episode from a cookout at like 2 a.m.
Yeah, Coles, that's a great point. I love that we have all these contacts in all these cities, because when I get back on the road, I'll be stopping in Pittsburgh, anywhere across the country. So that would be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for watching, everyone. Please like and hit that subscribe button. Truck, what should everyone do?
Buckle up.